Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. My name is Manaf Mansour, and I am the Associate Director of Alumni Relations and Community Engagement here at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University. It's a pleasure to see so many of you joining us this evening, and thank you all for RSVPing with maybe 3 days notice as we tackle this timely topic together and discuss strategies that we can use to engage our students in learning at home during this very challenging time. Many of you know that Denise is a senior lecturer here at the Graduate School of Education and co-founder of Challenge Success, an education nonprofit that promotes student well-being and engagement with learning. Denise also lectures nationally on pedagogical strategies that increase student health and engagement with learning and academic integrity. And Denise is also a Stanford alumna, and we're thrilled she's able to answer questions from her fellow alums like yourselves this evening. Denise will share a few words before we start answering your questions tonight. Tonight's Q&A session is divided into 2 sections. We'll focus on questions geared towards elementary or primary school students in the first half, take a slight break, and then refocus on high school and middle school students during our second half hour. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Denise. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I want to remind people right now, and it's important to do in a moment of crisis, that we need to gain some perspective and take a step back and really look at the big picture. And we know from research what matters is really going back to Psychology 101 and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We really can't focus on education until basic needs are met, like health, safety, and relationships. And those are the things I want us to really be focusing on as we go through this crisis. And remember to be grateful for having these things right now, including food and shelter and the internet, because many people living through this crisis don't have these basics to get them through. We know that gratitude is a nice strategy for lowering stress, and that is something that we can all be grateful for. The second point is really to put your own oxygen mask on first. And it's something we hear and we tend to forget because we're in the moment and we're in crisis, but it's really important for you and the health of your family to social distance and to make time for critical things that you need. Some exercise, maybe a quick walk outside to clear your head, some alone time if you can find a few minutes, to eat healthy, and to work on your own personal stress reduction. Maybe learning how to meditate for a few minutes each day, doing some deep breathing. All of this is going to help you be a better parent, which is what your kids need right now. Your number one goal for them, the older kids particularly, is to calm their fears and anxiety. They are online. They get push notifications of the crises that are happening and the numbers that are going on in Italy and Spain and whatnot. You need to let them know that they are safe and that you are protecting them, and watch how much both you and they are exposed to the news. You also, for older kids, want to strive for some semblance of routine. We know that the schools are all over the map. Some schools have closed and are sending nothing home for older kids. Some schools are asking kids to be in class from 8 a.m. all the way through to the end of the school day, with a break here and there for a granola bar. So everything in between, if you can set up some semblance of routine, let the kids sleep in when they're older. They need that sleep time. You don't have that commute to school, even if you have to get up for an early morning class. But really work on some routine where they're getting some exercise, they're doing some learning. I'll talk more about that in 1 second. And also I want you to remember that learning happens all the time, and that a very important part of their education is learning the skills they'll need when they're adults. These are skills that you want them to know by the time they get to college. How to do the laundry, how to cook, right? Basic life skills. You want them to know how to advocate for themselves. You want them to have strong communication skills. These are things that you can be working on at home without an actual lesson plan that we know is really important for the older kids, and to allow voice and choice. For the first time in maybe a long time, they're not saddled with a whole bunch of homework and extracurricular activities. They've got a little extra time on their hand. Let them find something that they're interested and dive in deep to learn. I want to give another plug for reading time, free unstructured reading. It's something that rarely happens in middle school and high school due to homework, and time for them to really learn how to be independent and work on their own. So Manaf, let's go to the time wheel. I know that some of you have seen our presentations called The Well-Balanced Student, and those are available where we ask people to think about their daily routine and how kids should spend the time and the importance of balancing all of these different factors. And now during this crisis, this time wheel might look a little different. School and homework might be a little smaller. Extracurriculars are either not happening or coaches are sending a bunch of things and you don't have time to complete all those exercise regimes. Maybe they're still doing paid work and tutoring or babysitting. We'd like to see the chores get a little bit bigger than what we normally see because kids are usually too busy to do them, and it's a really important skill for them to learn. And I think right now media is probably just as big, if not bigger, and that is because that is how they are staying connected to their friends. One of the main things that older kids do in school is learn to be social. And the best part of school for them is often the social life that they have there. So the other three parts of the circle, unstructured time, family time, and sleep, fall under something that we call PDF. And Manav, let's go to that next slide. PDF doesn't stand for portable document format, but it's a protective factors that we've lumped into three categories called playtime, downtime, and family time. And older kids need enough time for play. That is where they have a social life, and it might be that all they want to do right now is hang out with their friends on Google Hangout or do the games where they're talking to their friends and gaming together. We want that to happen for them within reason, and we want to have some limits. We want to make sure that they're also getting offline and exercising, that they're also finding time to unwind and some self-directed relaxation. Maybe they're learning to meditate along with you. Maybe they're doing yoga. Maybe they're going for a run, practicing social distancing, or a bike ride. We need them to do this and to strive to get enough sleep because these are real protective factors. This might be the first time in a long time that they can actually strive to get the 8 to 10 hours that the older kids need each night. Don't let them stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and get all off schedule unless it's spring break. Let's keep them on some kind of sleep schedule and ask that all devices are out of the bedroom at night. You should have been doing this before. I hope that you continue to do it after, but particularly now with all that's going on. And the most important thing is to preserve time for family. And I know that sounds a little crazy because you're spending all your time together in the same house, but often people are in different rooms and not really connecting. So make sure each day that you're asking your older kids to be at meals. Maybe you want to play some family games, and particularly think about service opportunities. In practicing gratitude, you realize that your family is better off than many families out there. And what can we do to help and be part of the solution? One suggestion I thought was great, it just happened today in a meeting I was in, is older kids offering to sort of babysit online and entertain kids when the younger kids are supposed to be in another house where the parents are trying to get some work done. So that might be a nice surface opportunity that every older kid can do. Right after this webinar, I want you to go tell your kids how much you love them and appreciate them, that this too will pass. They will get back to their friends and activities eventually, and thank them in advance for all the help that they're giving you as you and your family try to get through this. In my house, the mantra is, let's just take this one day at a time. And with that, I think we'll go and take one question at a time.
I see 19 open questions right now, specifically dedicated towards our elementary school students. But Denise, I'm going to open up with a question that comes up in practically every setting, and you and I talked about this while we were prepping as well. When we think about the disruptions that are currently occurring, here's a really large question with not a simple answer. Are our students falling behind? Are they going to be behind when they re-enter the classroom?
It's a great question. Schools offer a lot of services, right? They offer food, they offer safety, they offer childcare. For many kids, they offer therapeutic, OT, speech therapy, special help for kids with special needs. I'm most worried about the falling behind for those kinds of kids because we will see some sliding back when you don't have your regular therapy practice. For everybody else, in terms of academics, I'm much less worried, and so are the other researchers that I've talked about. And this is really to just calm parents down. If you think about what your kids learned in September, in January, and you ask them what they remember, chances are they're not going to say they remember a lot. That's because content doesn't stick, but the skills stick. And so when you're thinking about what you can be doing with your kids at home, I want you to be thinking more about skills than content. Every teacher right now knows what your kids are going through. When they get to school back in the fall, hopefully, the teachers won't be like, hey, how come mom and dad didn't do what they were supposed to do? They're going to be very, very understanding. The most important thing for you to remember right now is that your kids need to feel safe. You need to work on your relationships with them. They need you to be much more a parent than a teacher right now. I want you to honor what the schools are trying to do, but I don't want you to worry about falling behind in terms of academics. Remember, they've made it through 2/3 of the school year, and there are plenty of things that you can do at home with not a whole lot of work, including just having them read and read for pleasure, right? Learn some skills that they haven't learned before that are going to be absolutely educational.
That's great. I got a question from Kirsten. Any thoughts in terms of how much time is appropriate for students to be online? Examples like online learning games, online assessment assignments. There are lots of great resources out there, and my kids are enjoying them, but I feel as if perhaps there should be a limit on how much they are on screens each day.
Yeah, particularly for young kids, we definitely want there to be a limit. Now, if you've got to work and you've got to keep them busy, you do what you need to do, but try to take some breaks where they're getting off screens and you're getting off screens. If possible, that's what I meant by building in a routine. Try to build time for physical activity, that's going to be off screens. Try to build in time for family meals, that's going to be off screens. Try to build in time where they're reading for pleasure, ideally off screen, right? Even audiobooks get their eye strain taken care of because they're listening. So cooking, doing the chores, anything you can to get them off screen, I think is really important. There are some different rules of thumb. Some people will say an hour to an hour and a half is about the most they can handle before they take a break, both for their eyes, but also for their attention span. If you can arrange your meetings that way, all the better. And then obviously right before bed, particularly for young children, about an hour to an hour and a half before bedtime, you really want them to be off screen so that they will sleep better, which is also very important. And then when they go to bed, you can get some more work done.
That's cool. I've got a question from Bobby. Any suggestions on how to help kids with executive functioning issues? Starting multi-step projects, focusing without a classroom environment, physically surrounded, without teachers and experts nearby. It can be difficult. Thanks for some of your tips with that.
Yes, absolutely. So you may have kids who are getting assignments from teachers with lots and lots and lots of steps. It is perfectly okay for you to be their executive function help right now, right? The best thing that you can do is help them to break it down and to help them set mini goals, actually writing out a plan, posting it somewhere where they can see and where they can check off each step. It's going to be a really useful skill for them to learn. Eventually, they won't even need you as they get older if they practice these skills. But instead of getting overwhelmed with everything all at once, helping them practice that executive functioning by breaking it out with them step by step. Maybe you want to set a timer and say, let's work on this for 20 minutes of good focused attention. And then you get to check it off and then give them choices of things they can do during the break before they start the next step, maybe 20, 30 minutes later.
That's great. You've kind of danced around this a little bit with responses from the last two questions. But Michelle asked, how should schools be approaching home learning in terms of hours and instruction?
Well, everyone's doing it differently from what I am hearing around the country. And you know your child best, right? You are the one protecting your child. If the schedule that your school is sending home looks like it's just too much and things aren't working, you need to let the teachers know. You need to communicate the teacher. They don't see what's going on in your home. They have no idea how long an assignment is taking. An assignment that they thought would take 20 minutes might take certain kids over an hour. It might take certain kids 2 minutes. So I would say really emphasize communication with the teachers around timing. There's not going to be a magic number. Certainly a kindergartner cannot stay online from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. all day long. I'd be very surprised if your teachers were asking that. So as much as you probably need to balance and get work done, they need to also have some good important breaks and spend some time with you. So it might be working in shifts. putting on a little bit of TV or whatever you need to do if your shift is longer than their work shift. But there's not a sort of a set rule for how much time kids can be online. What I will say, some of the stories I'm hearing that are really worrying me is parents are trying to recreate school. I heard, one mom said, "Don't call me mommy during this time period, call me teacher." And that's just not the way to go. You are their parent. Learning happens at all times. Learning can happen on weekends. Learning can happen early morning, at bedtime. I don't want you to feel like you have to do a schedule so rigidly and they've got to be working at all times. There's got to be breaks. There's got to be downtime, playtime, and family time.
So kind of right off the bat with that, Buffy asks, what is realistic for schools to then expect kids to learn from home in terms of structure and content? Can they really expect the kids to go through all of their assignments if they're getting regular assignments from their school curriculum? And how can parents give feedback that's helpful for the school regarding those expectations?
So, like we started this whole thing by saying, let's take a step back, let's have some perspective, let's do some deep breathing. The teachers are under enormous pressure right now. The schools are under enormous pressure. They're trying to balance all the children that they serve, some of whom may not have internet access, some of whom may not have a device that they can use at home, some of whom might not have a quiet place or a parent who speaks English, some of whom have parents who are struggling with the virus right now. So they've got a lot of things on their plate. I would say try to honor what they're sending home, but if it seems like it's too much, absolutely get back to them. If you are an educator out there, I would say less is more. Assume that it's very chaotic at a kid's house right now, which it is. It is at my house, right? For all of us. And assume that if you can get a good hour or two in each day, I would call that a win. I would encourage free reading. I would encourage them to do things that they're excited about. Particularly with young kids, there's so many things that they can learn and discover. There's so many resources out there. But good old-fashioned play is very educational, right? Play a game of Yahtzee and work on some math skills and they won't even know you're doing it, right? So I would say for teachers out there, definitely take everything with a grain of salt and know that less is more. And for parents out there, don't worry, because less is more, and that kind of learning is going to be very valuable and will help them in the long run.
Absolutely. I have a question from Erin. Do you have suggestions for how to support our kids socially right now? Other than video play dates, how can we give our kids social opportunities during social distancing?
So video play dates are great. I'm all for video play dates. There's some interesting things happening around some neighborhoods. So when you go out for your walk with your kids, I saw this example that some neighbors painted rocks and put them in places, hiding places for other kids when it was their time to go outside and keep their social distance to find. So if there's creative ways that you can think about what can we do for other kids, right? That isn't necessarily screen time, that would be lovely. Old-fashioned pen pals, writing letters right now is also something that you could consider. Service opportunities where they write to the neighborhood to put out canned goods and then have one adult who is a healthy adult maybe pick that up and wash them down and deliver to food banks. So there are ways that you can be social that also incorporate some service, that incorporate some exercise, that doesn't incorporate screen time. That said, a lot of times schools that's their place to be with their friends. It's probably one of the things that they're missing much more than academics. So the more you can help them connect online with friends, Google Hangouts and Google Playdates, I would actually encourage that because they're really missing that right now.
Great to know, great to know. Just I'm seeing multiple questions about looking specifically at our K-5, K-6 students, our elementary school students. What should we know about our elementary age students that is really impactful at this moment, that really can help achieve and learn much more at home?
The big skills that you focus on in elementary school, well, the biggest skill is reading and literacy, right? So I would say that should be number one in your mind. If you have an emerging reader, spend time reading with them. There's actually some really nice programs online that you can get to help you. You can ask your elementary school teachers about them. Reading for pleasure, going back to childhood books that they're familiar with. You take turns reading, you read a page, I read a page, have them read out loud to you while you're doing the cooking. You know, there's the reading should be sort of number one. That's one of the main skills in elementary school. Math literacy is also important, but I don't want you to just assign worksheet after worksheet after worksheet. My guess is it's going to be much more valuable if you can bring math into sort of the real world, right? There's a lot of math in cooking, a lot of measuring in cooking. Let's count the socks as we're, you know, folding the laundry. You know, let's look at fractions as we're eating the pizza, right? I think there's lots of ways that you can do this that isn't that hard, that you don't have to be a teacher, but it's a small win if you can work on reading every day and a little bit of math. Even good old-fashioned times tables. What a gift to teachers if they came back knowing their times table and that's all you worked on the whole time. That's fine. Because the other big thing that happens in elementary school, besides literacy and math, would be sort of oral communication skills, listening skills, and social emotional learning. And that, as a family, you can focus on all the time, right? How to get along, how to self-advocate, how to take turns. What do you do when you don't get your way? That should be happening, you know, 24/7 as you're sheltering in place.
That's great. That's great. The age-old question of screen time comes up, and what do we do about screen time, and especially during these times where sometimes the screen is all we think we can do.
You know, I don't want parents to feel guilty when there's going to be more screen time during this time. You know, PBS is putting on wonderful educational programming, age appropriate. Everybody's got a TV, maybe even more than internet access. Do what you need to do to get your work done. That said, you should probably work in shifts, maybe sometime when the kids are sleeping, maybe work on weekends, not having as much screen time with the kids and really getting them outside, doing old-fashioned board games and puzzles. It is really important when you can get them off screens to get them off screens. Keeping in mind their need to be social and seeing other friends their age. You can have, you know, shout off with neighbors from across the street. I was on my walk the other day and some kids had done some chalk drawings on their neighbors' driveways so that when the other kids came out, they could have little messages. So there's lots of ways to be social off screens. I definitely think you want to keep in mind to try and get them off screens when appropriate, but also not feel guilty if you have to put them on screens, because that's the only way that you can get your work done.
And I actually have the webinar chat screen open right now, and it looks like a lot of folks are suggesting similar activities, including the chalk on the sidewalk. I saw that come through. So if you are making suggestions, please feel free to put them into the webinar chat so you can share them with everyone on the call today. I have a question here with a little bit of context. I'm a non-working parent, yet I'm spending my entire day managing the school schedule of 2 young kids, including lots of breaks, snacks, meals, activities, etc. I love the curriculum the school is providing, but even I can't manage it full-time without a job. So what hope is there for dual working families? How can I get the school to scale back? And just how can I, as a parent or a caregiver, have that conversation with a school leader or school administrator?
I want everyone to know that everyone is stressed, everyone has the best intentions in mind, and it is okay in a very respectful way to write an email, a nice note saying, listen, I think it's great. The activities you're sending home are excellent. And I just want you to know from our perspective, this is a lot. I think some teachers are so worried that you need help keeping the kids occupied that they're oversending. Other teachers are so worried that they don't want to burden the parent with the work that they're undersending, and then you don't know what to do with your kids. And people are all in between those ranges. So now more than ever, we need communication between the schools and the parents, and you do it respectfully. You do it with an understanding that there's a lot going on. I've heard really good things from schools saying, thank you so much to the parents who are writing and giving feedback and being so positive. You know, if you haven't done it in a while, thank a teacher today, right? I mean, I think we're all seeing just how hard the job is. One of the things I hope that will come out of this crisis is a newfound respect for our educators.
I will cheers to that for sure. I'm going to go for one more question before we take our break, before moving into the middle high school section. I've gotten a lot of questions on here about resources for public school students, for students without online access. What are some good online resources to help parents teach the last quarter of different courses, or to just continue the learning? Can you make any recommendations? Or if you can't make recommendations, are there specific aspects or attributes we should be looking for with online resources?
I think many of you, like me, are just getting lists and lists of links, right? And it could be a little overwhelming. I would think of it in this way. Almost every museum in the country, almost every aquarium and zoo, people know that you're out there looking for resources, and they're putting up webcams. They're putting up little mini lessons that you can play around with. I would say, why don't you make a list of the things that your kid is really interested in? Maybe it's, sea otters, maybe it's learning how to skateboard, maybe it's music, and together spend some time going online and looking for the free online resources that are using educational activities around that. So that's what I meant by voice and choice. It should really be about what the kid is interested in and excited to learn. And you name it, it's there, right? NASA, how to make chocolate, right? There's just so many things out there. Go-to places that we know are sort of high quality and have been for years would be Scholastic, PBS, the Discovery Channel. So these are just sort of people with solid reputations that won't lead you astray, but you can also have some fun on Google looking at what the kid's interested in and seeing all the different things that they can do.
The first question that I have for you, really geared towards our parents of high school students, is what does this mean for college admissions and application, and how should I navigate that?
This is where I need everyone to take a big deep breath, and realize that it's happening to every junior, senior, 9th, 10th grader, right, in the country. The colleges are absolutely going to take this into account when they are doing college admissions. They will not all of a sudden say, hey, what happened in March 2020? They absolutely know, and they're going to do what's best for your kid and try to be fair to everyone involved. I don't want you to stress about the ACT or the SAT or the APs. Right now, the most important thing is to work on your relationship with your teen and to make sure that they're keeping up their relationships with their friends. That's a lifeline for them. So if you can ease up on that stress and know that the colleges are absolutely going to take it into account, there's not going to be this sort of overwhelming problem when it comes to college admissions. The other thing I want to say is we have a college admissions workshop and we have a college admissions white paper that makes it really, really clear that it's not where you go that matters in the long run. It's what you do at the school that you're at. I know that many families are rethinking college choices. They want kids to be closer to home, or they don't have the money now with the financial crisis to go where they thought they were going to go. All of these are family decisions, but you should know and use the resources at Challenge Success to help you know this, that in the long run, it matters much more what you do at college than where you go, and those choices will be wise ones for your child.
I've got a great question in here about physical well-being. How can I encourage my 7th grader to exercise at home? He has no interest, and I'm struggling with getting him to move around.
Yes. Okay, so they need to move around. I would give lots and lots of choices, and I would offer to do it with them. So maybe he can challenge you to a dance off or some kind of, throw the ball, catch it, run around, do circles kind of thing. But it usually helps when you give them lots of choices. So not you have to do this video workout. Let's get them off screens and try to think of things that you could do as a family. Maybe you're going to do running and you're going to time them, and everyone's going to try and get a better time each day. Maybe you're going to do some jump rope or some hopscotch or some bike riding or some learning how to scooter. Anything to get them up and out and getting that heart rate up is really, really important. And it also gets them off of screens.
That's great. Let's see. Christina wrote that we're seeing a deluge of activity suggestions and different resources that all of us can tap into with not much quality control. Lots. My question to you, Denise, what should our litmus test or barometer be? How do we decipher what is good quality resources that we're receiving?
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Everybody and their brother is trying to be super helpful by posting these things, but there isn't quality control. What I said earlier in the webinar is to go to some trusted sources, like if you're looking for academic resources, right? Khan Academy is a trusted source. Scholastic is a trusted source. Certain museums and websites that you know are of high quality could be trusted sources. There's really not a litmus test, and the good news is it almost doesn't matter, because if your kid is going to be engaged in whatever they're doing, they're going to be learning. They're going to be looking at websites and determining what are facts and what are not facts. They're going to be trying to make arguments. They're trying to learn things. So the quality of the resource to me is less important than the engagement of your child and the excitement around doing it. Right now, your job as a parent is to keep that light, that spark of learning going, not so much to worry about coverage and covering content and covering the rest of ninth grade, but really give them the opportunity to take something and run with it.
So I've got a great question from Grace here. What are the best practices for incorporating public health information and news into online curriculum without creating a potentially political or polarizing environment at home, since middle and high schoolers have the potential to be more engaged in what's going on around us at the moment? And I'm just going to chime in and say there's a really great article from Stanford Children's Health on how to talk to your children about COVID-19 as well.
Yes, and we'll be posting something from Madeline Levine that she wrote for the New York Times about how to talk to your kids about this. I think it's a really great learning opportunity if your kid, if your kid is old enough to handle this, and this is the secondary students part of the webinar, so I'm guessing they are, to look on different sites and compare what is the Center for Disease Control saying versus some other site. Look at your county Board of Education and Board of Health and compare what the differences are saying, and how would we know what the real science is behind this? How would we go about finding that out? What are ways to do that? I would use it as a real educational opportunity to look at those different things and get them excited about it. My guess is it's the first time anyone even knew that they had a county board of public health, right, as a kid. I don't know that you would ever have had to experience that before. Maybe it's going to take you into a nice lesson on government and how that works and who controls what and how come different states have different shelter-in-place rules and some states don't have any, and what's the federal government saying. So without getting political into who's right and who's wrong, just how would you learn about what's out there and how do people get their information?
I'm seeing two questions on here that kind of relate to our 11th and 12th graders who are kind of getting to graduate and head to college, kind of reformat the two together. So for our 11th and 12th graders, how do we help them complete those spring quarter classes, those final classes, and maybe some really difficult subject areas? Science comes to mind for one of our participants here. And then part two of that question is, how do we think about extracurricular activities? How do we market those? How do we talk about them? How do we encourage that at home right now as well?
Let me take the first one, the second one first, which is on extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities are really great, right? When your kids were able to do them a few weeks ago, we know that they get their bodies in motion, that they have relationships with teammates and coaches and dance partners and whatnot, and you're learning new skills. And I would say if there's a way to figure out how to do that online, even if you can't play your sport together, maybe you can still do some team activities. Maybe you can do some online team workouts together for sports. I know that there are music groups and choral groups trying to figure out how to practice online. If there are ways to keep the extracurriculars going that don't add to your child's stress, I would encourage that, because that helps with this idea of routine and getting some sense of normalcy to happen. The second piece is, really people are worried about grades, second semester grades for juniors, second semester finishing up high school for seniors. And again, you know your child best, but at this point in time, I would really let this sort of academic parts go, unless your school is telling you differently, and focus on those skills that you know they really haven't had time to learn in school. The what we call adulting skills, right? Someone was joking around that they're going to have their kids learn to change the oil. Well, that's not such a joke, right? Maybe you want to learn some of these things that you haven't had time to learn before. So I would give them the choice. I would really let them drive what it is they want to learn. And if they're writing about it or teaching it to a friend and communicating it in such a way, there's some really good practice for some of the college skills that they're going to need when they get to college. Remember, when they go to college, it's a lot more independent learning that they've had in high school. This is a really nice time to practice that in a safe way.
From a scholarly perspective, what are, let me actually rephrase what I was about to say. We're getting a question about our students who are entering college and then potentially being at a disadvantage than the typical entering college student. Is that a fair assumption to make? Is that true? Is there a different way or a different perspective at which we can look at that statement?
Sure. So again, just like the college admissions people are going to take this into account, every college in America right now is going to take into account that there might have been missing some weeks or certain months of the end of senior year. I think what people aren't really focusing in on is that there's not a particular time where you have to learn a particular thing. That's not the way the American school system works. So it's not like everybody learns X between March and June in their junior year. It doesn't necessarily work that way. It's much more about learning skills, written communication, critical thinking, how to look at evidence and defend a claim. These are the kinds of things that they need to know for college. And if they're juniors and seniors, they've been practicing that over and over again through the different content that they're learning. So I don't want people to freak out that they're missing a chunk of content. If that's the case, the colleges will absolutely be able to help and know that that's happened, and they give you exams, placement exams to know which math class to be in and which world language class to be in. I would really not worry about that. Instead, I would really think big picture and say, what does our teenager need right now the most? They need to work on relationship skills. They need to work on communication skills, self-advocacy skills, and adulting skills.
What might be a boon for parents might be, a boon for teachers might be a little bit more difficult. Parents, many of us are entering the week of spring break, and with beaches and parks closed, what do we do with spring break? How do we make sense of that with our students?
So that's going on in my family right now, and I can tell you it's been a whole lot of nothing, and that is okay. For a teenager, there's a reason why spring break happens when it does. They are tired. They are exhausted. I'm exhausted. Just being at this level of anxiety and crisis is exhausting. Let them sleep. Let them hang out with their friends online. Don't let them go over to friends' houses. Let them pick up a book. Let them tinker at the piano. Let them take a bike ride. Let them go outside and play ping pong and the ping pong table. Whatever it is that they want to do. You know, a week of just good old-fashioned relaxation can do a whole lot of good. And then after spring break, the school's going to send something, or you can get back into an education plan. But that playtime, downtime, family time over spring break is really, really critical. Please let your kids have a break.
That's great. I'm seeing comments and questions in here about multiple platforms that teachers might be using. So I see one person's mentioning Google Classroom plus 4 to 5 apps. I know that my niece at home is using Academy and Google Classroom and Flipgrid. Is there kind of a max of the amount of different platforms that our students should be using? Is there a recommended number in any way?
Well, there isn't, because different schools are going to be doing different things. So I want to honor what the schools are asking you to do. But if it is too much, particularly with kids with executive function disorder, ADD, ADHD, it's really hard to learn and focus on all those different platforms. this is where communication with the teachers become really, really important. In a very respectful email, your student who's old enough to do this can write an email and saying, I'm having some trouble with the different platforms. Can you help me? Is there a way that we can build in one-on-one coaching or some tech time? Is there a way that I can do something not on this platform, but on this platform that I'm used to doing? I think you're going to see a lot of flexibility on the part of teachers because they know what kids are going through, and then they know that this is really a different kind of time. If that doesn't work at that point, then a parent can step in and also write a note to a teacher. But what a great skill to teach a kid some self-advocacy to write that note themselves.
Absolutely. Everyone's just asking some really great questions, and I'm just trying to make sure that we answer ones that are similar here. A lovely question about technology again. I'd like to hear about best practices for use of online technology to virtually teach high school and college students. How many hours is optimal online for high school and for college students?
Again, I don't want to be disrespectful to the schools that are having kids online from 8 to 3, but I do think it's a lot. I mean, I've just been on Zoom calls, and even I need to take breaks throughout the day. So I would say, without being disrespectful, what we tend to see is more like what we see in schools, what we advocate for schools that challenge success in real life, which is a block schedule, where you do some really good thinking for a chunk of time. And I think in real life, that's about an hour, hour and a half. I think online, that has to be much shorter. I think you do a lot of the work offline, where you're reading to prep for class, or you're looking at a video, and then you use that online time for interaction, for ways to assess, answer kids' questions, see where they are, host a debate, have a discussion, right? So that should be about 45 minutes to an hour max before you then need a really good break. You need to go run around, you need to get off screens, you need to have a snack, maybe you do another more preparation, and then you're ready for your next class if you want to hold it that way. I would think in much shorter chunks than even what we do with schools for block schedules, which is about an hour and a half.
Got a question here from Chris. How should we as parents and as educators be supporting students with special needs?
Right. So first of all, I was really excited to see that there are many things that you can do for kids with special needs to make online learning easier. There is voice recognition software. There's some great things for dyslexic learners that will make your website fonts all the same, and they'll highlight certain chunks. They will eliminate the distractions on the website. So play around on Google and ask around, maybe even put it in the chat. There's some great websites for kids just to help with that online learning. English language learners, I mean, we got some great translation now going on. It may even be better for them to hear it in translation than sometimes when they're just struggling in the actual classroom without that capability. That said, I am most worried about these learners. Many of them rely on therapies that are super, super helpful and need that continuity. And so if there are ways that you can keep the therapeutic learning going, the occupational therapy, the speech therapy, whatever it is, the executive function therapy online, let's try to do that as a priority.
And just to echo Denise's words, if those of you who are using some of those resources at home with your students, please feel free to share those resources via the webinar chat, and certainly we can take these conversations offline as well too. Let me just go ahead and take a look here. This is an interesting question from Daniel. How do we best work with families? What communication strategies, what resources with those who might have different backgrounds in education or different levels of education, and time to help with home learning?
I would assume at this point, if they're in secondary school, that anything you're assigning, let's just assume that they don't, you should not have them rely on the parents for help. So as a teacher, you should be assigning things that you know the kids can pretty much do on their own without parent help. I think that's probably one of the more equitable ways to handle this. I know that there are families without internet capability, and I know there have been some really interesting suggestions about teaching by phone, by cell phone, or by TV, by local television station broadcast, which would be great. And good old-fashioned offline but check in with your kids. So I would say the more you can be checking in with families who have the different levels of understanding and different education levels and different needs, really, the better. The best thing you can do as a teacher, I think, is to have that check-in, daily check-in if possible, 5-10 minutes with each kid. If it can't be daily, do it over the course of a week and really get a pulse on how those kids are faring and what you can do to make their lives a little bit better. But anything that you send home, please don't assume that the parents are there, that either they speak the language, that they know how to help. A lot of these kids are doing math at levels that the regular parent can't help with, but also don't assume that the parents have the time. Many parents are trying to struggle to do work at home, along with some health issues. So really, if you are going to send learning home, make it so that it's doable, that it's developmentally appropriate, that it's well scaffolded, and please check in with your students.
I'm going to ask 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. I've got a question here from Kristen. My kids are resistant to having a schedule as they feel they can manage their own homework. Do you have any thoughts about how to guide them?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's great that they think that they can manage it. We want to encourage independence, especially at this age, right? Many of them are going to be going off to college relatively soon, and they are going to have to be doing this on their own. That said, their prefrontal cortexes are not fully formed until they are almost 30, and so they may need a little bit of help. They may have their eyes bigger than what they can handle. So I think you work with them on creating their own schedule. You let them try it, and if it doesn't seem like it's working, ahead of time say, what are the signs that this is working? What are the signs that it isn't working? If it isn't working, we're going to come back together as a family and rethink, and maybe mom or dad gets to step in with a little bit more guidance and a little bit more structure.
That's great. And my last question, which I think is a question that's on all of our minds, is there a silver lining to all of this?
I am an optimist. I am a glass is half full person. I think there are many silver linings. One, I think that there's a much better understanding of what the purpose of schooling is for, and hopefully far more respect for teachers. Maybe that can get translated into more money and services down the road. I think we are going to see people focusing on the big picture and maybe less worried about content or drill and kill or worksheeting kids to death, and more focused on what we know to be the important things in school. Relationships, belonging, big picture skills like critical thinking, communication, collaboration, self-regulation, right? And I think that you're going to see, ideally, a real understanding and compassion between those who are lucky enough to have the basic needs that we started out this webinar with and those who aren't. And I would love to see that recognition, and kids and families actually working together to help combat the great rift between the haves and the have-nots, and really work to make schools there to help close the achievement gap, which we know is just continuing to grow. So I do see some silver linings. I know it's hard to keep the big picture in mind when you're just smack in it, but if everyone can take that step back, take that breather, really focus on the things that matter, the big picture things. Getting along as a family during crisis is a huge skill, right? How to live with other people and find your space and find your positive coping skills and find some joy in being together during this time. That's going to be a real way to get through.